and the book. And maybe you could get your ideas across, the same ideas in a 10-page essay. I'm not interested in a novel only as getting across an idea, but an immersion in an experience as well, which is what the novel does fantastically well. And I do think as human beings, and yes, I mean certainly narrative does not only exist in a novel, but I think the novel carries narrative spectacularly well. And I think human beings have always had a need and a love for narrative. It's, you know, it's how we shape things and make sense of them, and we understand the world through metaphor, and that is what the novel is.
So it's really the best vehicle for you.
It's the best vehicle for me, but of course the best vehicle for me because it's what I love and spend my life doing. So therefore I would insist it's the best vehicle. But actually it's the best vehicle for me. It's what I've spent most of my life with as a reader and writer.
But can you sympathise with any frustrations with the novel form in terms of it is too chatty, it is too...
I mean, I'm a novelist, of course I can share frustrating novels, those frustrations in the world. And I think also that, you know, we are now seeing much shorter novels again. I do think the novel in the 90s got particularly bloated in a way that was really annoying. You know, I mean, if you read, to me, War and Peace is not a bloated novel. It's a long novel that is long. A lot of the novels of the 90s and the beginning of this millennium were bloated because in the middle you have writers going off on really clever riffs to show you all their thoughts and various things and stuff that's not integral to text.
So a bit indulgent.
Really indulgent. I think the novel was extremely indulgent, and I think there's a pulling back from that now. I mean, I'm talking about the Anglo-American subcontinental novels, although that is particularly American novels.
Very much so. But in terms of working in different forms, you mentioned film, are you more comfortable in film? You know,
yes, really, I think if I have a good life, is a life in action, a life with physicality. And I think if I'm a writer, then I'm a writer and a writer, because the mere physical act of writing, typing, is really anti-life. And in a way, because I read a principle sometimes forever, I studied chemistry for 22 years, and then I ended up as a film scholar, so I wrote something like 3 films here in book, and then I wrote many films, and I ended up with all the things. And I think that part of life is, I mean, strive for life is this absolute wanting to be in a location, a landscape, on the mountain, where there's lots of people, the stars, and learn from photographer or actors, drama. I think the longing for a kind of colorful, vivid physicality, which is, I mean, in my case, I found the writing itself very fast, but I'm not from my imagination. So. And that, I think, is kind of against the boredom, against the death of the video, because they really like, and I found very sad, and that's what physicality of it. So I would struggle to get life through other formats, photographs, and this is teaching, all the trouble. Against the mere fact of this
when you're working on a novel, do you miss working with other people? Is that something?
No, because a different format demands a different way of working. So a novel is absolute, you are the master. It's absolute itself that you cannot have other people for them, otherwise it is diluted, chatting. So I don't really believe, but film is absolutely about chatting together. You cannot we cannot photograph, we cannot do the longer job, we cannot do the set and writing. So it's so amazing working with some professionals who are 25 years doing beautiful writing and photograph and acting. You know, you gain so much multitude of life. I mean, they are, in a way, that's not life, and that's another version of imagination and writing, but they have their own master work. So I don't miss the other format, but when you're in another format, you benefit a lot within that format. And then when that work is done, then I immediately shift back to either to writing or to filmmaking. I feel healthier. Otherwise, completely paled, self-congratulated, very self-content compared to real life. I don't really agree with that.
I don't think it's actually, if you're working on your own, the possibility of self-criticism and self-doubt is also greater.
It's fine. I just want life. Sorry, I just want, if I can live, vivid life, reality, meeting lots of other artists and write my own thing, that would be the wonderful life. I think it's just too short if I type all my life, sitting there. It's just for me it's not healthy, but for lots of people they love that they can die on a chair, and it's not my life. I mean, most of the writers eventually die when they're typing, and that's fascinating. For me it's very sad. I really adore the active life. Yeah.
So, do you find writing is such a kind of a solitary experience? Do you need that balance? Because I'm always interested to know what people's writing routines are. Whether you have set patterns of writing, whether you need to go out and talk to people at the end of the day of spending it in front of the computer, or...
I mean, I'm very happy to spend, many hours a day at I never think of writing in terms of, and people say it must be very lonely. I don't think it's at all lonely. You're there with your imagination and these characters and whatever, or you're sitting and staring at a blank screen, and that's not. But loneliness isn't something that particularly enters into it. But I'm not someone who could go and live in some, house on the top of a mountain and write and not, because the reason I'm very happy to spend my days writing on my own is because then I go out and see people and do things. I mean, I do think I think the completely self-enclosed life would drive me mad.
The balance.
Or imbalance. It's totally imbalance, but of a particular sort. But no, I mean, I do I write all this and I go out. And travel a lot as well, which I love.
Maybe there's also kind of I guess in this country, if you talk about political attitude, it's weird vocabulary, but for me it's kind of political attitude. Because me, I don't want to live professionally as a professional writer, which means one story after another story, then another story until the day you quit. I don't trust that kind of writer. So the way I'm making film is called amateur filmmaking, guerrilla filmmaking. Even I have 20 years film school education, and the way I write now was completed. I never went to the literature school. I never studied English in my life until 5 years ago. I started to just write English. I think the way I'm doing is like I often find professional life is boring, and the novel format, the complete enclosed format, halfway through I quit. I couldn't find the life in that kind of perfect professionalism, and I guess that's why I say I respect Stephen King, but I can never finish any Stephen King novel because halfway through you get really bored, and it's the death of something. And I think I found that some certain male professional people, they will say 7 to 12 lunch. Then swim, then 5 to, unless it's sports, writing as a sport, I'm a writer like a sportsman. I can never do that. It's like flow, and I think basically I live as nomad life, more like bohemian life, so I could write maybe in the airport, or maybe the baby gone to sleep, or your lover is not around, or after you moving house for a week, quietness, or in some little holiday going around. So it's more like picking up the staticness of the daily life. Pick up those time and then you write. And otherwise I will go out to live. And I trust that more.
So you see that more as kind of guerrilla writing and the same way to do...
I just can't do this very scheduled professional life and sit there, I mean, most of them, all the male writers do that. Your wife will be cooking, the children will be playing, and you will be contemplating this front garden and write. I can't do this. I want to participate life. Because imagination also lives there if you participate in life. It doesn't have to be stopped. There's a war between them. Yeah.
I could never sit and write in the airport. In that way. I can't do the sort of, when writers will say, well, I write 1,000 words a day. I don't know how you that days when I write 5 words. And I can't do the, 7 to 12 and then break. But what I do need a routine in as much as I wake up in the morning, have a cup of coffee, read the newspaper, sit down. And that part is routine. How long I stay sitting down varies, and the deeper I'm into the book, the more I do get into, it starts as near the beginning of the book. I find I need a lot of self-discipline to get going, and then there just comes a point of near obsession where that's what I'm doing till I know that my brain will slow down for a day, and I don't actually feel that when I'm out in the world I'm participating in life, when I'm writing I'm not. It very often feels the opposite, that you're out in the world, you're walking around, you're seeing people, you're having conversation, that there's a easy superficiality around it very often, and that it's sitting down and writing is when, and I won't say that's when life happens, because both parts, they feed each other, but I don't think of sitting down as writing as removing myself from the world. If there's something in the world that I'm particularly interested in, then writing a novel about it is the best way I know to engage with it and to interrogate it and to become obsessive about it and go and find out. So when I'm not working on a book, as these days I'm not, and that, the last time after Burnt Shadows ended at about 2 years before I started the next thing. But I'm aware that there's a part of my brain that is just clanging around emptily, and that I'm much less engaged in any kind of serious way with the world around me than when I am writing.
So writing turns that on, turns on that engagement.
Or the engagement turns on the writing.
Right. I suppose that brings us on to kind of the subjects for your novels, and I suppose in a way the effect the Granta experience has had on your writing practice.
No.
No. Have you guys managed to write throughout all of these trips and the whole of this year?
I've done it.
You haven't done any? Oh, okay. Not good ones, just get sent off.
As I say, we live half of our life before this name there. I mean, really, maybe.
So you all had projects on the go prior to Granta, and you just carried on.
Yeah. I finished a novel this year, which I was mostly through. And I'd had to do more traveling around when Burnt Shadows came out, because I was the only person who wrote that, whereas there are 20 of us who sent off all over the place. Yeah, so this has actually been a low travel year.
Oh, okay. So where did you both go from working on these texts? Can you just talk about where you went next after you'd finished these respective novels? What was the next project and the next project? What were you pushing?
What, you mean after Burnt Shadows?
Yeah, after Burnt Shadows and after Time.
The novel which is excerpted here, which is the one, The Brighton Pavilion, which, I finished a few months ago, it's coming out next year. And that I had started work on in the last couple of years.
Right.
So, when they said we need something Granta, I said, well, there's a thing already written, go and use it. But yeah, there was, after Burnt Shadows, I used to be a writer who went straight from one book into another. And I did that for 4 novels. And then I realized that the danger of doing that is that one novel was kind of leaking into the next, and that I was getting lazy, and so that I had written the last book in a certain kind of way, and so then I was doing the next one with very similar things, which was a habit of my brain to think about a narrative in a certain way. And I sort of forced myself to stop and take a long time off between books. And then, it's sort of those old grooves in your brain kind of cover up and then you can do something different. Except then I think I took too long off after Burnt Shadows. About 2 years, which is a long time to go without writing.